Okay, everybody, so today we're going to be going through what I'm calling a one-shot video. So I'm going to try and film the entire project, start to finish on my screen, because I hate video editing and I want to get this to everybody fast. So in some previous posts, I showed how to make, pressure fit earrings, but we need somewhere to display them. And so I designed up really quickly a variety of flat pack stands. And what's kind of nice about these is the tabbed feet come off, they're very simple to make, and they cover a lot of really helpful techniques in Illustrator. So it's something that I think will get people started. There's a few sort of advanced techniques, but for the most part, it's using a couple basic tools. So these are the designs here, and I'm sorry if you hear the yelling in the background. There's nothing we can do about that. It's my cat. She likes to scream. So that's her story. Nothing's wrong with her. She's just complaining about nothing. But here we go. So we're walking through some different designs here. So I'm definitely going to show this one. And what's kind of interesting about this design is you have to get all of these dots lined up. And I know that there's a person out there that is individually dragging circles around and trying to align these by eye. And that's just the worst way to do it. I'm going to show you how to do it basically instantly. I also did a little inset two-tone acrylic tab up here. We probably won't show much of that because that's covered in a previous post. And then this one as well. So this is another one where people are often, when they see this idea, their thought is to just make a ton of circles and drag them into place. That's really tedious. There's actually a way to do this mathematically, essentially, so that they're evenly spaced and they look really nice. So we'll work our way through that as well. So here we go. Here's some of the final stands. We're also going to start with this one, which is really simple. We're going to talk about rounding corners, distributing all of these circles, making the tabbed feet, and using the Pathfinder tool. So that's where we're at. This is what we're going to be making. Let's get started. So now that we're done with that, let's open up Illustrator. And I'm going to create a new document. So if you're familiar with Illustrator, I'm going to try and go as slow as possible for the new people. I'm sorry, but we'll get to the good stuff. So I'm just going to make my artboard. It's kind of really doesn't matter. It's arbitrary because you can always scale up, but I think I'm going to kind of stick with around the size of what can fit in the Glowforge since that's what I'm using as my laser cutter. I'm going to hit create. I'm just going to create one artboard. One thing to note is if you create a document with multiple artboards, so multiple pages, when you upload that to the Glowforge interface, it's only going to detect the first artboard. So you have to make either one really large artboard or save your artboards as different documents. So that's something worth noting that I've discovered. So we're going to hit create, let that open up, and of course I made it in the wrong direction. If you do that, all you have to do is grab your Artboard tool and you can actually hand adjust your artboard. So if I open up this window a little bit so we can see, you can see I can reverse my dimensions. And there we go. Now I have 16 by 20 when really I meant 12. And here is our artboard. And then you just click out to make that permanent. So let me give you a little walkthrough of a couple of the tools we're going to be using. First is the shape tool or the rectangle tool, and if you click and hold, you'll see it opens it up to a variety of different shapes. So you can always just grab the rounded rectangle tool to make that first shape, and it's already going to have rounded edges, but I'm going to show you a different way as well, so I'll delete that. I also will use the Pathfinder panel, and this is the panel where you can combine, subtract, split shapes, divide them up. This is the tool you really want to understand if you're going to be using Illustrator to make anything for the laser cutter. So with the Pathfinder, and connected to that is the Align tool, and this is where we can align objects to one another so we can get things like an even rows and then distribute them as well. We often will also use the Stroke tool, and then of course we have like our colors here. That's not super important. I'm sure there's a tool I'm not thinking about. But beyond that, we're really going to be using the selection tool and the direct selection tool. So let's start with the simplest design. I'm going to actually turn off my fill because I don't want fills in my shape. Go back to my stroke and click my rectangle tool. And now let's zoom in and kind of get started. So one thing that's kind of neat about the shape tools, and in fact most tools, if instead of just dragging out and starting to make a shape, you just click once, it's going to open this dialog box that will allow you to input the size that you want. So I know from looking at my ruler that I probably want something that's about 5 inches high and 2.75 inches wide. That seems to fit a lot of the longer earrings, and that looks really nice there. So I'm going to click OK, and then let's take a look at this. And using your direct selection tool, if you hover over these, if you're in any of the newer versions of Illustrator, you should be able to click and drag, and you can intuitively drag your corners, as you can see here. You'll also notice that up at the top, there's a corners dialog box. So even if we just were to click this normally, you might see that's not there. You're going to have to go into your transform sometimes, and I think there's more options here if I remember. There's about 15 different ways to make corners. That's probably one of the easiest ways. Additionally, you have this scale corners dialog box here, and this is important because if you uncheck this, I believe by default it's checked, and then resize your shape, sometimes it won't scale the corners the same way, so they'll change their ratio. But that's essentially the fastest way to get corners. You can also adjust it, I believe, in the appearance panel. So if we click our object, you can go to effects, and then I think it's somewhere around here. There's somewhere where you can like round corners within this. I never do it this way because what happens if you do it this way? Oh, distort and transform. I think it's somewhere around here. Of course, I don't remember exactly where it is. But if you adjust it here, it is in stylus. If you round corners here, it becomes an effect you can turn on and off, which it's not working on this shape because it already has rounded corners. But if we create this one, go to stylize and round corners, it's going to cause a problem later on. So that means if any shape I cut out of it, which we're going to need to cut tabs for our feet. Let me just show you this. I know I'm getting a little ahead of the actual techniques, but you'll get the idea. If I come to my Pathfinder and then cut that out, you can see it's going to automatically round those corners, and I don't want that to happen. So you can do it from your appearance panel very quickly, which is this little sun, but it's not my favorite way to do things. It does allow you to kind of turn it on and off as needed, but I'm actually going to just delete that effect and delete that shape. We're going to come back to this one here. So the intuitive way is to use your direct selector and grab your corners right here. And you can individually select corners as well by just highlighting the corner you want to adjust with the direct selector and moving it along there. And you'll see your corners are adjusted there. So let's undo that. When we select with the direct selection tool versus this one, you do see the little corners tab up here. There's a couple other places I believe you can adjust corners, but we're going to spend a million years on that if I don't move on. So there's that. Now we're going to make the tabbed feet. So I'm going to kind of just guess at the shape I want here. So you want to make sure it's long enough that it's going to be stable, and I have a feeling something like that's probably fine. I'm going to try and get it to like 1.5. You can see this is the tedious way to shape things because they start scooting around. There we go, 1.5 by 5. And then I am going to round those corners. I'm just going to use my direct selector and grab the top of the shape. You can see I've only selected that because these anchor points are dark and these are hollow. And then I'm going to gently pull that in until that looks right to me because I want a rounded foot. And now here comes the most important part, and it's really simple. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool again, and now I have to figure out the slots. So I know that my material, it's about 3 millimeters, so it's 0.125 inches wide. And that's the only measurement you need to figure out these slots. You don't need to like really add any curve or anything like that unless you want them to be super permanent. And in this case, that's not what we're looking for. So I'll click. I'm going to do my width as 0.125. And then the height's not really super important, but I'll just set it at 0.5. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to grab my shape. And now I actually want to angle it back a little bit. I don't really like when the stands are straight up and down because people tend to be looking down at them on show tables. So I want it to sort of be facing up. So I'll rotate that slightly by just grabbing the corner. Move that to where I sort of want it in the shape. And then I'm going to highlight both objects. Because this one's on top, I can open my Pathfinder and hit minus front, and it will cut that little tab out. And now all I have to do is repeat this shape by copying and pasting it, or by Alt dragging it. So if you start clicking and you drag, or you start dragging and you click Alt, it will copy the shape. Now, I actually like to add little tabs to the bottom of this as well so that the slots kind of nest into each other. It makes them a little bit more stable. So what I'm going to do is click again. It's going to remember my measurements, and I'm going to drop that in. And then what I want to do is I don't want the slot here to be deeper than this area here, because otherwise this is going to push all the way up in and we're going to have like a little gap at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is move this underneath and kind of see about the length that I need, adjust this up, and then move this into place of where I'm going to want it on this shape here. Now I'm going to click, begin dragging, and hit Alt to repeat the shape. And now I have my two tabs. But I want to make sure these are perfectly centered on this shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them to around the distance I would like. Let's say I want them kind of close to the edge here. Select them both, and right mouse click and group them. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Align panel to get them perfectly centered on here. Now, the reason I had to group them is if I don't group them, both of them will center and then will both be overlapped in the center. I need them to stay this distance. So I'm going to highlight the objects that I'm trying to align. I'm going to go to my Align To selector and hit Align to Key Object. Now, when you do that, you can then select your key object. So I'm going to hit the back piece and say, I want you to align to this key object, and hit Center. They're now centered. I can open my Pathfinder and hit -front, and you can see this is where sometimes we will run into a problem of it adjusting all of the corners. Okay, so we see that we had the same problem, and I guarantee I know what it is. If we come on over here, back to our appearance panel, you can see I accidentally left the round corners function on. Now if I turn that off, you'll see it's now correct, so it's in the right place. Now my screen recording cut out a little bit and I accidentally sort of undid. You'll notice that these are now not straight. So let's undo that, go back to this stage and repeat that really quick. So we have our individual objects. And just to show you what will happen if you forget to group them, if I hit center now, they're all just going to drop into the center. And you'll notice this object moved as well because I didn't select a key object. So undo, hold shift to grab both of my objects, hit Command G to group them, highlight everything I'm trying to align, and then hit center. Now in this case, I didn't really need to select the key object. You're going to see where that matters a little bit later. So we've got those. Go back to our Pathfinder, minus here, and then uncheck the rounded corners in our appearance if they appeared there. Truthfully, I can really just throw that function out. I don't need that. And now we have a really nice sort of like tabbed slot, and that's going to fit really nicely. As long as you make these slots the width of whatever material you're using, they should fit great, especially with this sort of counter slot here. It's going to really grip. So now we have to make the holes, and that works exactly the same as we've done here. I'm going to create a little ellipse, and I just know by eye that it's about 0.09 inches, that should work perfectly fine. I'm going to click it, copy and paste it. And part of the reason I usually alt drag is because of this. They just sort of tend to fly all over the artboard here. I'm going to select both, go to my Align panel, and then I'm going to hit Align to top of selection, and that should at least bring them up together. Now I'm going to move them a little closer, so I can use my arrow keys, or I can hold shift and it will jump a little bit faster. So I think something like right around there looks pretty good. Select them both and hit group. Select all the things I'm trying to align, and then as a reminder, we can hit Align to Key Object here. Click this, you'll see it gets bolder, and then center them there. Now you don't actually have to subtract them from this shape. Just having these lines here, your laser cutters are going to know to cut them, but I don't like to accidentally ungroup things by moving them around. So I'm going to hit -front here, and you'll see nothing really happened, but now that this is actually cut out from this shape, it's now one functional shape. So that's our first jewelry holder there, and that's a really simple one. There's also a written tutorial for that if I kind of went a little too quickly or talked a little too much. So now let's create the taller one. And then we're going to create the arc, and that should sort of pretty much cover everything I think you might need to see. So I'm going to pull the rectangle tool out again. And I'm just kind of going to guess here. I think like 8.75 by about 4 might look nice. And this is where I don't really like to do this because I spend forever just watching those little parameters down there change. Instead, we can just click and say I want something that's 4 inches wide and 8.75 inches tall. And now I'm going to drag this up and use my direct selector to adjust the corners. So I want to adjust both of these, and I want them to be a little bit more rounded. But these ones, let's say I want them to look a little bit different. So I'm going to grab those, and I'm only going to round them a tiny bit just so I don't have any sharp corners. So I'm putting more of the round on the top. I think that looks kind of nice. Now, same thing, I'm going to draw the feet for this one. And there's a lot of different ways you can sort of design these. So I want these to be a little bit longer. Just going to adjust by eye, grab the first corner, and maybe I want that like a lot more round at the front. So I can do something like that. And on the back, I only want a little bit of round. So I know where the front is versus the back. And the whole idea is you can do anything you want with this. You can make slightly different shapes. You can make them wider. You can make them much skinnier. You can make them even on both sides, or you can do something like this. Then I'm going to grab my rectangle tool again and click. I need 0.125 inches wide and then whatever height. Now, if you want to rotate this a very specific amount, there's another way you can do that. So you saw before I just did it by eye, and it kind of shows you where it is on the 360 degrees of the circle. Instead, I'm going to grab the object. I'm going to go to Object Transform, and I'm going to hit Rotate. Now with rotation, I can tell it exactly what angle I want. So if I want it to be 45 degrees, I can type in 45. And if I hit preview, you can see it rotates it. So I think to go the opposite way, I think it's like 145. There we go. So either way, you can flip it later if you need to. So 145, let's say that that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to slide this down to about where I want it, kind of more to the front because the lean back is going to cause it to be weighted on the back. I actually have a feeling that's going to be a very extreme angle, so I am going to just adjust this back a little. Once I'm happy with it, grab both shapes and minus front from my Pathfinder. Now I want to show you if you accidentally have your shapes out of order. So for example, I'm going to right mouse click this and go to Arrange, Send to Back. If I grab these and then minus front, I'm going to get a completely different shape because the other shape was in front. So if they're out of order, there's a couple ways to adjust it. You can go to your Layers panel, which is right here, and open up your layer. And those objects are highlighted. So you can see the little dots next to what I have selected, and I can actually drag the order to kind of change their place in the order, but I find that to be tedious. Generally, I just click on the object I want behind. I go to Arrange, either Send to Back or Send Backwards, and I use the keyboard shortcut so much I don't even remember what it is. I just know how to click it. So I think it's like Shift Command, and then the brackets will bring objects in front or behind. So I know there's a lot of things to remember, but remember, you can slow this down. I know I talk quickly. So we've got that foot. Let's repeat that. Let's make the rectangle again so we can have our feet. I'm going to hit that, copy and paste, drag them into alignment of kind of where I want them, about that distance, group these objects, and now I'm going to bring them both up instead, shorten them to around the height I want, bring them back down, select both of these objects, align them. It looks like they were already aligned. Minus front, and now I have tabs on this one as well. So for that circle, if you remember I had like a little emblem on there, all I did was figure out the size, click my ellipse tool, so maybe it was like 1.5 inches, and I'm going to unite that so that they're actually the same. I'm going to undo it for a second. I want it to actually be a circle, not an oval. And then I just set that to fill And I use my direct selector to actually delete this anchor point here by just clicking it and deleting it, clicking these two and hitting Command J to join them, and then just dragging it up to the top. Now, there's another day where we can talk more about shapes, but that's essentially what I did there. I'm not going to do that on this one. I'm just going to delete it. Because truthfully, I could have just glued that circle up there. I did not need to engrave out that half circle, but I did. So now we want to talk about getting a ton of these aligned on there. And this is sort of a unique technique. So I'm going to click once to do that 0.09 that we know that size is. Zoom in. Going to switch that back to outlines. I'm going to Alt drag to kind of create a little bit of distance, and now this is going to be for studs, so I don't need them to be super far apart, and I want to be able to fit 2 rows. I'm going to group that, then Alt drag that group out, and now I just have to get everything aligned. You can see these are not aligned, they're kind of spaced weird, so I'm going to grab both, go to my Align panel, and align them on the top or their baseline. It's all going to be the same. Group that so that now they're grouped, and then align them to this so that they're centered, and that was a very tiny movement there. And now a fast way is, well, there's 2 ways. I can Alt drag these down until I have about the amount I want, and then I can distribute them. So let's try that technique first, and then I'm going to show you the other way to do this. And I know this seems like a lot of stuff just for some really simple objects, but these techniques in general will allow you to create so many different things. So they're a little hard to select because they're small, but let's say I want about that many. Now all I have to do is figure out how far up I want them to go and how far down, and I'm actually okay with where they're at. Now I'm going to highlight all of them, and then I don't know why I'm scrolling here, but there we go. Come back to my Align panel, and there's a Distribute Objects. So Distribute Vertical Center, if I click this, they're all now going to be perfectly even. And now they're ready to go. So that's one way to do it. Now you can also distribute all the way across an object. So I can grab everything here and I can distribute. And you can see it sort of changes the way they distribute. So just be aware that what you have selected will affect that. You can also distribute something across the artboard as well. So you can hit Artboard, Distribute, and you can see it's now perfectly evenly distributed with the first one starting at the edge and the bottom one starting at the other edge. So let's go back in time here and show you one other way. I'm going to grab this group again. I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and Move. And now with Move, I can decide how I want it to move. And I don't want it to move horizontally, but I do want it to move vertically. So let's say I want it to move 0.5 inches. I can then hit Copy, and it will move that object after making a copy of it. I can then actually continue to hit Transform and do that over and over again, or if you're like me, just hit the Command D and just keep going. And it's gonna copy them at perfect even intervals. So that's not quite what we were looking for, but that's exactly how to do it. So instead, if I go, that's not quite far enough away, I can go to Object, Transform, Move again, and instead say I want them to be about 0.7 away. And you can use your preview to sort of see how far that is. So, okay, copy, Command D, bam, and I'm done. So if I wanted to center those across this shape, I could group this again. Yes, you can have groups and groups. Highlight both of these things, and then I could say center vertically, and it would center them on the object. But in my case, I think I'd like to have them a little closer to the top than towards the bottom. And there we go. So that's this one here. So we've made our simple one. We've used our Move tool and our Align tools to create a slightly more complex design. And now we're going to have to create our half moon. And this is actually the hardest technique. This is it's actually not challenging, it's just something most people don't realize how to do. So I'm going to create a new circle by clicking, and I want this one to be 8 inches. Don't know why that's slightly off. Let's hit that at 8. So if these are grouped and you try and change the size, it's going to adjust that one. If you ungroup it, it allows you to adjust the parameters individually. Click OK. I've got an 8-inch circle now. And now I find the circle tends to be a little too extreme, so I'm actually going to pull it out into an oval. I don't know why I felt I had to make a circle first. And we want to divide this in half like we did that previous circle, but there's a couple ways to do it. So one way is to draw a line where we want to cut the shape. And you can do this with some very complex shapes. So I could draw like a whole, very complex mandala and cut it out if I wanted, but for now I'm just going to use a line. I'm going to grab both, come to my Pathfinder, and this is my favorite Pathfinder. It's called Divide. And what Divide will do will slice anything that's overlapping but not delete anything. So now I can divide, and now the line will disappear because it didn't have it had no mass to it, so to speak. But I can use my direct selector to grab this half of the shape, delete it, and there, I already have a closed shape. If I tried to use my regular arrow tool, they're going to be grouped. So I'm going to have to ungroup them before I delete them if I use the wrong arrow. So right mouse click, ungroup, delete the bottom half, and now we have our half moon arc. And we can quickly make some new little feet, but you guys have already seen that, so I'm going to skip that, and I'm going to go to trying to figure out how to get a bunch of circles beautifully distributed. And there's no clear align to circle in our align tool, so we're going to have to kind of think through that. So it's actually relatively simple to do. The first thing is to kind of guess how many circles I need. So I'm going to say that I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's say I want 10 to go across. So I'm going to click 0.09. Whoa, that's not what I wanted. Click again. I forgot that I have to change both of these, 0.09. Click OK. And now I'm actually just going to copy and paste this a bunch of times. Actually, just once. Now that I think about it, I know a little faster way. So I know I need 10 or 12 steps. We can kind of guess here. I'm going to grab both of these shapes, and I'm going to go to Object, Blend, Make. And now what Blend does is it will change one object into another object. So let me actually show you what that looks like so you can understand how that tool is working. So I'm going to make a circle and a square, and I'm going to change the square's color. I'm going to grab both of these objects. I'm going to go to Object, Blend, Make. And you can see it blends the objects into one another. Now, I can also go to Blend Options, and instead of smooth color, I can say specified steps. And let's say 5 steps, preview, and you will get intermediary objects in between the two extremes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this specified step techniques to cause the circle to repeat a certain amount of times between, because it's not needing to transform, they look exactly the same, but we can have it multiply this way, which is kind of interesting. So delete, set both of these to outline so we can see them a little better. Let's actually make them a brighter color. And now I'm going to say specified steps, and it doesn't matter how far apart they are, and you'll see why after. Grab these, Object, Blend, and you can go straight to Blend Options, I believe. Smooth color. Oh, looks like you can't. Used to be able to do that. Object, Blend, Make. We can see that it's already made a certain amount of steps, but we want the we want to be able to adjust it. So let's grab that Object, Blend, Blend Options. And we want to hit Preview. We want specified steps, and we don't want 33 steps. We only want, let's say 12. And if we uncheck or check that, we'll be able to see that with 12 steps, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So it's not counting the first and last object as a step, and that's important to know. So if we only want 10, we need to hit 8 steps, and that's going to give us 10 circles. Click OK. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Correct. Now, what I need to do is get these to follow along an arc. And I know so many people out there will be taking circles and dragging them into place, and they're going to be all uneven and you're going to waste a lot of time. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a line that follows the arc that I want. And I can use the pen tool if I want, so I can make some kind of crazy wavy shape, and this would also work. When you want to exit, just hit the escape key, and then you'll finish your shape. Or I can copy this. This is one kind of sneaky way. Copy, paste, scale it down till I kind of get the arc I want, sort of follow along the edge. If that looks pretty good, I actually just want to delete this bar because I don't want that there. I want just the arc, so I'm going to use the direct selector to grab that path and delete it. And it works fine because there's anchor points down here. I can delete that bar and it doesn't delete. It stops when it hits an anchor point, essentially. So if I click this side here and delete, it's going to stop when it hits those anchor points. So perfect. I have my arc here. If I want to adjust it more, I can actually take my direct selector and I can adjust. Looks like I have an extra little point down there. I'll deal with that later. I can actually adjust it, move it, scoot it with the arrow keys, all of that. But I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm fine with it. So let's go back in time, and there we go. Now, if I select my blend and my arc, kind of over-clicked there, a little zealous. If I click both of those and I go back to Object and Blend, I can hit Replace Spine, and it will distribute those objects evenly across the spine of that line. So in this case, I'd probably have to shorten up or adjust my spine, and I believe I can still do that here. So if I don't want them way at the bottom, I can't really put an earring in there, I can go to my pen tool, and then the Add Anchor Point and Delete Anchor Point tool. I'm going to hit Add Anchor Point because I want to create a stop up here, so right around there. I'm going to kind of guess here. You can see that like the tool is trying to sort of show me where to align. It says intersect with the center. I'm going to click there. Then I'm going to use my direct selector to delete that part of the spine, and you can see it kind of freaked out here because there's still a point down there, and there's a point down here. Alright, so it kind of had a little panic attack here, but that's okay. Let's release it if we can. Let's go to Object, Blend, and then Release, and see if that will let them go. Okay, so it looks like we did manage to delete a bunch of our circles. But what I can do, and this is sort of a little cheat here, is I fix the shape and I want this shape. So I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to Command Z and go back in time to before I messed everything up. And then I can paste it. So copy and paste like is outside of time. It doesn't have anything to do with what's happening. So I can actually copy and paste back in the past. So that's what I did. I'm going to re-grab these. Object, Path. And then, oh nope, not path, blend, replace spine, and you can see now I have exactly what I was looking for, and this is ready to go. So just to make sure that the Glowforge interface doesn't get confused by this, like this replace spine object, I'm going to go to Object, Blend, and then you can hit Expand, and it's just going to turn them back into circles. There's no line that they're existing on or anything like that. And now I can either minus front from this object, and you can see they turned black because they now joined with that object. And there we go. So that replace spine will allow you to do a lot of really cool stuff. It's an easy way to get lines like for a clock around a circle. There's so many different ways you can mess with it. But there we go. So now we have our basics for a shape. And from here on, the sky's the limit. It's so easy to just sort of use these tools or these techniques to create lots of different shapes. So really fast. Drag those out. I can fuse these together. I can now come back in here with my direct selector and start curving them. Holding Shift to grab both of these. I can use my white arrow tool to sort of move that in. And you can see that there's so many different things you can learn to make when you get used to using this Pathfinder, your shape tool, and your align tool. So hopefully that was really helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, let me know. The printed post will eventually be linked in the bottom of the video as well. So thank you guys for watching, and good luck with all of your future Illustrator and laser cutting endeavors.